Every year, there are those teams that fans have super high expectations for. They think they might be potential contenders and playoff teams. And those teams, they just don't meet the expectations we set for them. Last year, both the Raiders and Broncos had a ton of hype going into the season, and they both fell short and were selected inside the top 10 of their draft. Who are going to be those teams that we're hyping up a little bit too much this offseason? I have 5 teams that I think people are going a bit too crazy over, and I'm not saying these are bad teams, or these teams will even miss the playoffs. Some of them I do think will, and I will get to that there, but some of them I think we need to manage expectations with. So let me know, who do you think is being overhyped? Who do you think is just getting a little bit too much praise? Let's go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to make some enemies right off the bat. I already know a lot of people aren't going to like this video, but I think the Buffalo Bills are slightly overhyped. Let me explain. I'm by no means saying this is a bad football team that won't make the playoffs. They still win over 10 games, they still make the playoffs, but people picking them to go all the way or even win the division, I think need to slow down a little bit. This has become a trend with Buffalo. Year after year after year, we talk about the Bills like a legit contender, and they fall just short. And this is a team who still has some pretty glaring holes in the roster, in my opinion. Tremaine Edmonds was huge for them last year, and while I love Dorian Williams from Tulane as a pickup, replacing that production this year is going to be really tough. Tremaine Edmonds was incredible. He's now in Chicago, and I just really wonder what that linebacking core is going to look like now. I also think they really needed to add another boundary wide receiver or make a move in that receiver room to pair with Stephon Diggs. Gabe Davis, we had a lot of expectations for him to really solidify himself as a number 2 receiver last year, and he left us disappointed. I think moving Gabe Davis to the slot and maybe getting another wide receiver could have been huge, and while I love Dalton Kincaid as a prospect, and I think he's got tremendous upside, I don't know if he's what they needed when you had a tight end in Dawson Knox. Now I think they're going to use Dalton Kincaid as more of a receiving tight end, so that'll be interesting to see. But I do have question marks about that. And then on the offensive line, this is still a unit I don't really have a ton of faith in. Deion Dawkins is the only guy who I placed on my offensive line rankings for both interior and tackles. I still have questions there. I know they drafted Osiris Torrance, but is he going to start right away? There are some question marks. And then Josh Allen's decision making has got to improve. He was really struggling down the stretch, forcing the ball, threw some key interceptions, and he was a big part of the reason they lost that game against Cincinnati. He turned the ball over way too much in key moments, and I need to see it first. The defense is great with Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Von Miller, and Tre'Davious White all coming back healthy, but that's just it. They all have injury concerns over their career, and I do worry if they can stay healthy. In a loaded division, I think they finish in 2nd or 3rd place in the AFC East, a loaded division, but they're still a wild card team. They could still make noise in the playoffs, but I have some questions on them being a legit contender this year. And this could age really poorly, but they're just not one of the teams I'm buying the hype into this year. Another team I think who has to manage expectations are the Minnesota Vikings. This is a team that was in a ridiculous amount of one-score games last year, and by some miracle, had an unbelievable record. That just doesn't happen 2 years in a row. It doesn't happen the amount of times it happened last year for the Vikings. I just don't see them having that amount of luck again. Offensively, this is a pretty fun team. Justin Jefferson, KJ Osborne, TJ Hawkinson, and the addition of Jordan Addison, offensively, that is elite. But other than that, I really have some question marks about this team. We got to start asking the questions about Kirk Cousins. I'm a big Kirk Cousins guy. Is he a quarterback that can get you to that next level, the promised land? While I do like Kirk Cousins, these are questions that we need to be having. Also, the interior offensive line was a pretty weak unit for Minnesota last year. And this is a team that allowed 47 sacks. I like the tackles, but you got to look at the interior here because that is a position that needs to improve. Also, there's a team that lost Dalvin Cook, and I think that's going to be tough for this squad to kind of bounce and get that production from anyone else. Alexander Mattison has been great as a number 2, and he's been good when asked to step in for an injured Dalvin Cook, but we haven't seen him be a true number 1 back before. Is he going to be able to put up the numbers Dalvin Cook does, or even close to that? I think it's going to be interesting to see. Where I absolutely hate this Vikings squad is defensively. This team had a pretty rough defense last year and only got worse by losing Zadarius Smith, Patrick Peterson, and Dalvin Tomlinson, who were arguably their 3 best defenders last season. They had a -3 point differential on the year, and I don't see how it gets better after losing those guys. Andrew Booth and Lewis Cine, who were their picks last year, they should be back, but are they difference makers for this defense? They got Dean Lowry, they got Byron Murphy, but overall, I just am not in love with this defensive unit. I have questions about the offensive line, and I think this is a NFC North that's better than we think it is. I'm not sure in a division that's gotten better across the board if this team is going to contend, and I have some question marks around this squad. And unfortunately, I do think the Vikings are one of those teams that misses the playoffs this year. The Ravens are another team that I just can't buy the hype into. Lamar Jackson got his money, and rightfully so. He has been an incredible quarterback since he came into the league. However, this is a guy who has not been able to finish each of the last 2 seasons due to injury. Is he going to be able to stay healthy for a full season? Not to mention, when he has been on the field, he has taken steps back each year of his career in terms of completion percentage, and turnovers have gone up each year since his MVP season. This is going to be something I'm going to be monitoring, because you paid Lamar Jackson all this money to be your franchise guy. Can he be the franchise guy that they need him to be? And I'm not sure if this is the year that they're going to end up taking the jump. Is he going to be able to stay healthy? Can he throw the ball like he did his MVP season? It's something I'm going to be keeping an eye on. The big offseason move that Baltimore made was signing Odell Beckham Jr. And I don't know why people are acting like this is a difference-making move. He hasn't played football since 2021. He is older and coming off an ACL tear on a team that has historically been a run-first squad. I know, new offensive coordinator, maybe the game plan should change a little bit, but I'm not sure how Odell is going to help this Ravens team at all. A guy who's been consistently injured throughout his entire career. He's got attitude problems and he doesn't get the ball. And I think this is going to be something to definitely watch. I'm not really buying the hype on Odell this year. Now, I do like Zay Flowers, and they got a nice running back room. I think those are some nice pieces there. Mark Andrews, still one of the top tight ends in football. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on. Zay Flowers has been electric at Ravens camp so far, which is great to hear. And then I do have some questions defensively on this team. Now, I know this is a team that ranked in the top 5 defensively last year. Why would I have questions about this team? Well, for one, losing Calais Campbell is a pretty big loss. He was a big piece on your defensive line. That's going to be a big loss for you. And this, as a whole, is a good defensive unit. And it was incredible after acquiring Roquan Smith. But my questions lie in the cornerback room. We know how good Marlon Humphrey is when he's on the field. He apparently has some injury stuff. He might miss a little bit of time early on in the season, which that could be really rough for them. But secondly, their number 2 corner is really rough. They had Marcus Peters last year, and this was a secondary that struggled. And now they brought in Rock Ya-Sin from the Raiders. Now, as a Colts fan that got to watch Rock Ya-Sin for a while, I don't think he changes much for this defense. And you go up against wide receiver duos like Jamarrchase and T. Higgins, George Pickens and Deontay Johnson, Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore. That's 6 of your matchups this year, and I worry if they're going to have the cornerback depth and help needed to win these games. In a loaded AFC and a loaded AFC North with some health concerns on this roster and secondary concerns, I think Baltimore misses the playoffs as well. The Titans every year are one of the most overhyped teams by their fan base. This shouldn't take too long. Well, I think they have a good defensive unit. Their cornerback room is not one of their strengths. They have struggled to stay healthy, and they don't have that X Factor CB1 that I think changed their team. Christian Fulton, Caleb Farley, Roger McCreary, they're all fine, but none of those guys have shown that they could be a number 1 X Factor corner. But offensively is where I have most of my concerns. Ryan Tannehill is okay at best. I don't think he is going to bring this team much success, and he has turnover concerns in big moments. Derrick Henry is still dominant, but how much longer does he have? Running backs have a shorter lifespan than most positions in the league, and he has been dominating for so long. How much life is left in those legs? Especially considering he is now running behind potentially one of the worst offensive lines in the league. I know they made some moves. They got Andre Dillard. They got Pierre Skoronski. Nicholas Petit-Frere is going to be suspended for, I believe, 6 to 8 games early on in the year. And this offensive line is still a very weak unit. Dillard barely played for the Eagles last season, and Skoronski is a rookie, and rookie tackles take time to develop. Look at Andrew Thomas. Every year, the Titans sign a veteran wide receiver, and it doesn't amount to anything for them. Hopkins is good, but in another team that is historically run first, and yes, I know they have a new offensive coordinator, I need to see it first. I'm not in love with the quarterback. I'm not in love with the offensive line. The cornerback room I'm not a huge fan of. And I think we're just overhyping the Titans a little bit too much. I know they're well coached, but I think Titans fans are going to be in for another disappointing season. And lastly, the most overhyped team in the league by far to me are the Chicago Bears. The Bears fan base to me is up there with the Dallas Cowboys as potentially the most obnoxious fan base in the league now. I understand they made some great moves this offseason. DJ Moore, Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Walker, Nate Davis, Darnell Wright, to name a few. This is a team that really went out and they addressed some of their biggest needs. You got Justin Fields some help, but first and foremost, their defensive line is one of the worst in the league. Andrew Billings, Tayshaun Gibson, and Yannick Ngakoue are not changing this team. I'm sorry. Yannick Ngakoue is coming from my Colts. He's fine, but this is a guy who's bounced from team to team, and it took him this long to get signed. I feel like that's pretty telling. Zach Pickens and Javon Dexter are NFL projects who could be good, but they're not day one difference makers. Offensively, Justin Fields is by far the most overrated player in the NFL. He can't read a defense. He doesn't go through his progressions. He makes one read and takes off. He holds on to the ball for too long, and I know people want to point to the preseason. First, neither pass was beyond the line of scrimmage, they were underthrown, and that wasn't him making those plays. Now, the offense did a good job. Let's see him when he's got to read a number one defense, because he's going up against the second unit in Tennessee. I worry about this team generating pressure defensively, and their offense I think will struggle in the pass game, even with the new additions. I still think they are a bottom 10 team in the league that people want to believe are going to be the NFC North champs, which I think there is an absolute 0% chance of that happening. I think they are still the worst team in this division. I think the Bears are going to struggle this year. But guys, who do you guys think is becoming an overhyped team? Who is the team people are hyping up a little bit too much? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.